Hi, Pratima.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Nikolai.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. How are you?
Very good, thanks. So we're having a storm in Europe with mild weather, so all the snow is melting.
Oh, wow.
So we had the warmest day I think ever recorded yesterday in Oslo.
Ah,
12
okay.
degrees centigrade. And usually we have it below, zero.
So we had 12 degrees centigrade in Pune, and that is supposed to be the coldest ever recorded.
Right.
So I think I'm just waiting for Dr. Premnath.
I told you, Pratima, that I have a doctoral student here from India, didn't I?
Yes, you did. You mentioned.
Yeah.
Then you said from Delhi, I think.
Pardon?
From Delhi, I think you said, right?
Yeah.
We'll just give him a minute to join, Dr. Premnath, and then we can start.
Yeah, can wait a little bit because he got now like 13, 15 attendees, so
We'll take a few minutes.
people are still joining.
Yeah. Dr. Premnath is finding it difficult to join, so I'll just try and help him in a minute and see.
Just for those that maybe you can hear me, for those that are waiting, Pratina is helping Dr. Premnath to come online. So we'll start in a few minutes.
He's joining in. We'll just give him a second. Yeah. So, hi everyone, and a warm welcome. I think on behalf of PeopleWiz and Reconfig, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for being with us this evening for the webinar on data-driven organizational design to improve efficiency and productivity, an AI-powered technique. Also a warm welcome to my panelists, Tim and Nikolai from the Reconfig team, and Dr. Premnath from NCL Venture Center. It is a very auspicious day in India today. For the benefit of my European panelists, we are observing Makar Sankranti, which is a harvest festival. It essentially means that we pray to Sun God to give us warmer days now as the winter ends and a better harvest in the coming days. It's a great day to have new beginnings. And I'm so happy to be able to announce a partnership with PeopleWiz and Reconfig on, in such a small event, a nice event today. PeopleWiz has had an interesting journey over the last decade now. We've had very interesting offerings around organizational design, people advisory services, managed HR services. We've had our hits and our misses trying to serve clients across India, Asia Pacific, Middle East. Especially around organization design, our consultants have always tried to bring rigor and objectivity to almost an inexact science of structuring an organization. So we try whatever we can in terms of doing in-depth research, extensive external benchmarking, try to be able to do a detailed organizational diagnosis so that we can come up with solutions that really make sense, are very effective structures for our clients. But we've realized, I think even that is not enough because we are in very, very unusual times. Even experience and expertise is not enough. We need more. The team at PeopleWiz had been looking for a tool to help us out in this journey for organizational design for some time now. And I think before we found out about Reconfig, we had tried other tools as well. And we were looking for a simple tool that would be scalable for a small SME setup, as well as a large corporate setup. We wanted a tool that had a rigor of analysis, but still a simple interface. And Reconfig really checked all the boxes for us. The biggest differentiator, obviously, for us was the great team and the excellent people behind Reconfig. So I think when Tim suggested entry in India, we jumped at the opportunity and we thought, why not? Let's collaborate. It has been a very interesting journey so far for us. But that gets me to my panel. Let me introduce my panel to you. We have with us Nikolai Warren. Nikolai is an associate professor at Norwegian University of Life Sciences. He's the co-founder at Reconfig, the brain behind it. He's an internationally recognized expert in the field of organizational design, an MA in psychology from McGill University and a PhD from Oxford University. Before he switched to academics, a very rewarding career in consulting with Deloitte, Accenture, PA Consulting. So happy to have you today, Nikolai. We also have Tim. Tim is the Chief Marketing Officer at Reconfig. Tim also runs his own boutique marketing consulting firm, Growth Engine, from Amsterdam. And with a master's in informatics from Amsterdam, Tim has held various positions as a marketing leader responsible for growth and expansion. He's also a board-level advisor on business strategy and transformation. And in addition to his role at Reconfig, he's a business coach for several startups and for sustainability initiatives as well. We also have with us Dr. Premnath. Such a pleasure to have you, sir. He's the head at NCL Innovation at CSIR NCL, the National Chemical Laboratory at Pune. And he's also the founder director at Venture Center, a BTech from IIT Mumbai, a PhD from MIT US. He has been a Achieving Technology Enterprise Scholar at Cambridge, UK. And under his leadership, Venture Center has really grown in the last 15 years to be one of the really sought after and a leading technology incubator, awarded and recognized by the Government of India many times for encouraging startups and the entire ecosystem here in Pune, in the western part of the country as well. VC has supported over 650 entrepreneurs so far and continues to support many more. And they've been able to generate an amazing revenue of 1,000+ crores in India. Venture Center has been a client of PeopleWiz for over 8 years now, and we've enjoyed every moment of it. I must confess, Dr. Premnath, Shine and I often talk that we have such a stressful career as a consultant to our clients, but whenever we visit Venture Center, we come back a bit younger. That's how we look. The positivity that we get and just the openness of the team there. I think Venture Center was a natural choice for us when we wanted to introduce something new and different and try a different technique in organizational design. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your views. You've been the first pilot beneficiary user of the tool, so I'm looking forward to that. Before I begin the questions, just a few things. It's a webinar mode, so all of you would be muted. You have a Q&A button right there in the middle. Please submit your questions there. The panelists would speak just for about an hour, and then we will ask them questions. You can just keep sending your questions, and on your behalf, I'll put the questions across. The session is being recorded. All of you will get a recording. If there is any internet interruption, don't worry, just come back in, and we've planned for some backups. Right, so now we start. Nikolai, I think the very first question to you, I'll start with you. How does organizational design impact efficiency, productivity? Why should the leaders care for org design? Let's start with that.
Let me see. I will go to my slides here just to have some support for what I'm going to say. So thank you for the introduction, Pratima. I appreciate the invitation. Now, the questions you pose here are very broad and fundamental. But I will try to at least, address them in the time I have available, at least partly. So one way of looking at this is to think about the role of a manager. So, you have many different definitions of what the manager is. Somebody who can motivate people or help the processes run in the firm and so on and so forth. But another important role, which is often underestimated, is being the architect of the organization. So if you're the architect of a house, you have to make sure that the house serves a purpose, whether it's a home or an office, and you have to make sure that the house has the required number of rooms, and that the different rooms that need to be placed next to each other are placed next to each other, that the building has the right number of stories, and that it generally serves its purpose while being cost effective and so on. There are some requirements that need to be met, and you have to design the house to meet the requirements. In the same way, when in the role as an architect, as a manager, you have to make sure that the organization is designed for the purpose that it serves. So that's a very basic answer to the question, I think. So and this is rather difficult. So the discipline of organization design basically offers you some tools, some principles, some evidence, some processes that can make this a little bit easier than it would have been. But if you want to look at sort of the basic building blocks of organization design, what are we really talking about? Well, you can reduce it actually to two key decisions that you're making. So if you imagine that you start just with a group of people, you have a bunch of people and they have all kinds of different tasks, but there's no specialization, there are no formal roles, there are no management layers. There's just a group of people working together. Then you might eventually, and this is something you encounter in startup firms, and Premnath probably knows more about this than I do, that over time you have to make some decisions. You have to start structuring this group of people. So the first decision then is usually to say that, well, instead of just having a group, we'll have 2 units or departments or teams, or whatever you call it. You distinguish between A1 and A2 in this illustration. And you say that A1, you are going to be the market people, A2, you're going to focus on the product, for example. And you have a set of roles that you place in each of these units. So this is called decomposition or grouping if you take it from the bottom up. You decide that some roles belong together and some roles do not belong together. Obviously, once you start dividing things into different units or teams, you immediately get the opposite problem, and that is how to integrate them, because you still want a coherent organization, you still want an integrated service or product. So somehow they have to coordinate with each other and plan and schedule things so that things are consistent. So these are the 2 basic organization design decisions. You divide things up and you try to integrate to compensate for the division of labor that you have created. So based on these 2 simple decisions, you get this, a system which may look like this one. You have a bit of hierarchy in the sense that you introduce some levels or layers, depending on how many roles or units you define below each role. You will have a span of control that can be large, it can be narrow or broad. The size of unit can be small or large. The roles can be specialized or more general, and so on and so forth. There are all kinds of consequences that will stem from these basic decisions. So this we could talk about for hours. However, one of the key challenges here is that when we change the organization design, if we introduce a new structure or change the existing one, we have what I call some direct outcomes. So if you remove one management layer, for example, obviously there will be one level less than you used to have. But what are the consequences of that? There's usually some intermediate outcomes from that, and then eventually you will have an effect that you can observe, either positive or negative, on the organization's performance. So we're talking about financial performance, innovation, productivity, customer satisfaction, and so on and so forth. So one of the challenges in organization design is that, by and large, you don't have one lever that you can pull and immediately and directly affect financial performance, for example. It's going to go via various other factors. So if you reduce the number of management layers, for example, it will make the organization flatter. There will be less of a distance between top management and the bottom, but that can be positive or it can be negative depending on the circumstances. So this is then making it into a fairly difficult challenge in the sense that you cannot directly see the impact sometimes, but you can indirectly trace what the effects are of organization design decisions. But this also means that you need a fairly holistic approach. When you have an organization design challenge, you have to understand the organization, you have to understand the goals, the work processes, and the context before you start changing it. Now, there's a key organization design issue that that I've been working on for several years, which is illustrated here. And this is, so when you're making these basic decisions, you are trying to align the formal structure, both with the strategy, but also with the work processes, with how people work. And this is illustrated here. So in the top illustration here, the illustration on the top, you see an organization with 4 departments and then subdivided into various teams that are then subdivided into roles. And you see a work process that involves 3 of the departments. So the relevant roles in this work process are indicated by the yellow color, and then the arrows indicate the interdependencies between the people who are performing this work process. So somebody, this may be inputs and outputs, could be resources or information that's being exchanged between the people in this work process. And one basic insight that we have in this field is that it's not the same how you organize these roles in such a work process. If the people who need to communicate and collaborate are placed in different units, that's going to be more costly than if they are placed in the same unit. And why? Because if they're in the same unit, they will usually report to the same manager. So they will have a team mandate or the same goals for the department, that we will usually have the same priorities, maybe even the same norms and culture, and they will more easily get the work done than if they have to negotiate with people in other departments that may not prioritize the same things that they do. So this basic insight is the one that we're using in Reconfig as the key foundation, that it matters whether you have a formal structure that is aligned with the organization or not, and that it's possible to actually do something about it if we know something about both the formal structure and how people work. Now, there are some general design principles that have been formulated by several people. This is one example. Eberhard Rechtin, who said that in partitioning a system into subsystems, choose a configuration with minimal communication between the subsystems. So this is basically saying the same thing that the illustration I had communicated, that try to group the people who are the most interdependent in the same unit, and you will reduce coordination costs. And don't partition by slicing through regions where high rates of information exchange are required. So if there are people who need to exchange information or collaborate intensively, don't draw a boundary there. Don't put the boundary there. Put it outside, so that you create an independent module instead in the organization, a team that is semi-independent. So, and these are the principles that Tim will cover later that have been operationalized in Reconfig. Now, this would have been easy if we as managers had complete knowledge of everything that was going on in the organization. If we knew what every role did, and if we knew every person that every employee communicated with and every work process in detail, we wouldn't have any problems doing this. The problem is that several studies now show that managers do not have this information. So this is one very recent article on the Harvard Business Review blog, where they showed that managers did not know much about what is going on in the teams below them in the organization. And of course, with more remote working, and when you're communicating via Zoom, it's probably even more difficult to get this information. And they say here that managers were shocked when they revealed how the teams actually were working. And the same thing has been shown more directly related to interdependencies, where one has asked managers to indicate who they think are in touch with each other, and they often get it wrong. So this leads to a need for what we call the situational visibility. Basically, we have to collect information about the organization in order to have a data-driven approach. We need to have the information there so that we know who works with what and with whom, and then we can start thinking about how to structure the organization in the best possible way. So what I'm saying here is also that you need a diagnostic approach. In this field, there are some general principles like the ones I just mentioned, but how you apply them have to be tailored to every specific case. So that's why you cannot just look up in a book or an article and determine which model you should implement. You have to collect data, understand the organization, understand the context, and the goals and the requirements, and only then can you figure out what the appropriate model is for your particular organization. So that was what I had planned to say, Protima.
Yeah, and that's so great, Nikolai, for thank you for making it so real, really. So I think all of us are being pushed, even especially in the current times, to do more and more with less and less. And I think being able to figure out efficient ways of doing that without putting too much extra load and pressure on the organization is really the way to go. But let me try and bring this a little bit closer home. So Dr. Premnath, I had a question for you related. In your experience of having built Venture Center, as well as having mentored some really amazing startups, how important has been organization structuring for you, especially for growth? Have you tried any standard effective approaches to structure organization? Has that helped?
First of all, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for inviting me. Well, I'm not an organization or organization design expert by any means, but I'll share my personal experiences. Sure. First of all, there are different types of organizations that we are engaging with, and different scales of operation, right? On one side, there are very, very small organizations, which are startups just getting off the ground. And then as you go ahead, you see them scaling. Right. And by the way, when you see them scaling, you realize the importance of real structure, right? That's where you can see people graduating from being very gung-ho about the nimbleness of a startup to bringing structure and processes and so on and so forth to scale up, right? So that's where really one starts thinking about some of these things. On the other side, of course, I'm also involved in Venture Center, and we have seen it grow from from a very small organization to much bigger. And over time, we have debated, discussed, thought through structure of how the organization should be structured to be effective. And of course, it's always learning in progress. But nonetheless, I thought the insights which we've been discussing recently in the context of Reconfig are very relevant. So a few points which I think I can probably bring to the table. When we look at organizational structure for many of these organizations, let's talk about Venture Center, for example. There are many things which we have been thinking about. For example, we work with startups, so we want to be nimble, right? One of the things which I tell my colleagues is that you don't want startups to be talking to you as if you were a government department, right? In the sense, you want to reflect the same nimbleness in the culture that a startup has, right? So in that context, you need to structure it in such a way that people can actually act quickly, right? The organization has to be structured so that there is a significant degree of operational autonomy without making it too hierarchical. And for that, there has to be boundaries set with organizational autonomy, right? So you want smaller units, perhaps, which are fairly cohesive in their decision making, and not necessarily having to go many layers to get any decision out, right? So this has been one of our parameters because of the fact that we work with a lot of small companies who are nimble, right? Besides that, of course, there are many parameters which decide all of this. One is, of course, that people like to associate with people of sort of a little homogeneous background sometimes, right? So there are professional communities, there are people who associate with different. So, you know, in a good example of this is an academic or a research organization where people tend to gather together based on their professional backgrounds, right? A department of economics likes other economists, a department of chemical engineering likes other chemical engineers, and so on and so forth, isn't it? But there are also these things where we are trying to deliver projects and specific activities where there are teams coming together, working together in different parts, some bringing some parts of the story, some others bringing some other parts of the story. And this brings in another dimension to organizational structure, besides, of course, people's preferences. And then there is complementarity of function, you know, in terms of key result areas that a particular group wants to drive. Those, how do you align things to make that happen faster, quicker, with less resources, and so on and so forth. We have also thought through things like, for example, verticals, you know, in sense of we have certain operations which stretch across different verticals. For example, if we are working with biotech startups, you know, they all have to deal with mentoring or with investment finance. So these are all, you know, different practices which sort of contribute to a given vertical as well. Besides that, of course, organizational structure also plays a role in giving a sense to to our team members of professional growth, right, of how that's going to happen. Sometimes layers are necessary for that as well, right? Also for coordination, efficiency in coordination, which of course is very central to what Reconfig does. And this we really see the need, especially when we are scaling up programs. In many ways, Venture Center is like a bunch of startups which are sort of clubbed together and scaling up, in the sense in many ways we have different practices which scale up independently. So in many ways the coordination activities are quite important, and I think that's again where we debate and structure and we think about organizational structure quite a bit. As Nikolai mentioned, COVID has of course made things much harder, right? One more important axis has come into picture. What we used to assume as people sitting next door to you, now they are sitting miles away, and coordination becomes even more challenging. On the startup side, we see the challenges of organizational structure really coming up at the scale up time, as I tell you. So, you know, if you're talking about a team size of about 10 or even 20, you can keep a very flat structure. People have access to the leaders, to the vision, to decision making at high speed. All of that is fine. The moment you start getting into a larger organization with specialized functions and so on and so forth, you will need to optimize time to, you know, achieve the goals of the organization. And the moment that happens, structure is invariably there. Now, while doing that, for startups, I think it's important to retain some character of their of what makes them nimble, which is very often smaller size and operational autonomy, right? And that is what I think sometimes you need to plan for, build for, while doing some of these things. The last point I just wanted to leave with you, which of course I realize it's a very challenging issue, but this whole issue of organization structured, certain organizations which are which can operate a little more linearly versus some which might have to operate in a matrix fashion, right?
Yeah.
And that is of course a very different animal, but nonetheless there are a lot of learnings in organizational structure which can be applied there as well. So I think these are the few points that I thought might be relevant to how organization structure has been important for us at Venture Center and our startups.
Great. I think, yeah, this is so good, you know, until a few years back, I think I could count on my fingers how many structures are possible: functional, product, geography, etc. Now Now the choice is amazing. Every geometric shape is possible. Now we've got team of teams, we can have concentric circles, we can have squares, we can have towers, we can have DAO, which is the newest one, decentralized autonomous organization. So much is possible. Let's go to Tim. Tim, we've been waiting to hear you speak now. Tell us more about Reconfig and the magic there. How does AI really add value? What happens there?
Yes, I will. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that Protima likes working with Dr. Premnath. Well, we like working with Protima and Shine. We have weekly meetings on Monday, and it's always a great moment in my week to hear the enthusiasm and the insights. So we work with partners across the world, like Canada on the other side, and a lot of Europe, of course. But I always like it when the moment comes that Protima and Shine come on the screen. I like working with people that are competent, but I also like people that are nice, just nice to work with. And specifically in our field, we're in the people's business, right? We are talking about structure, artificial intelligence, etc. But these people are competent and nice to work with. And I think Dr. Premnath is joining me in thanking Protima and Shine for being a great consultant, for being great consultants.
Sure.
Good. So let me go to the slides because I'm a marketeer and I still like slides. So let's look a little bit about how to use data and tools for organizational design. Building upon what Nikolai just said, we think the world needs better organizations, more effective organizations. And that's because, as we call it, all of you are facing a triple I challenge. There's information overload, there's increasing complexity, and there's insufficient governance to meet the 21st sustainability challenges. And sustainability is a big driver for creating a better planet and a better society, but it's also a driver for additional complexity. Now, you can only create better organizations if you have a better design process. And what we currently see is that many leaders or consultants, they work intuitive. And that's great if you have like 20 years of experience and you use your intuition, but it's better to merge the intuition with a structured approach. We also see that it's highly political, and politics will always play a role. And as human mankind, we come a long way, kind of Darwinistic, using politics to create organizations. But it's better to blend again politics with strategic insight, strategic direction. And what I don't like is if there is a highly political organization where there is a secret process and then all of a sudden the boss says, this is going to be the new structure. So that's something that we are against. We want to involve more people in the design process and we want to make it more transparent. So about the information overload, Protima will share the slides, I guess. So there will be links, etc. But this is a relatively recent article from Harvard Business Review that says that a lot of people, and they're talking about 80% of the time, a lot of people are using most of their time just coordinating. So that means that they are talking to each other, and that's okay if you're a manager or you're hires, you're paid a salary to do coordination, but it's not okay if you're a surgeon or a researcher or a teacher, because in that case you want to spend most of your time with doing your actual work. Now, the other thing that I mentioned already, that's the area where we're getting now, and we have responsibility not only for top line, bottom line, but also for the world, for society, for inclusion, for fighting global warming, for reducing the plastic soup in the oceans. But these shifts are only possible if we have, and we call it stakeholder capitalism, if we also include stakeholder governance. Now, companies nowadays, organizations nowadays have many more stakeholders than they used to have, and they're internally represented by several organizational units or roles. But that adds a lot to the complexity of org design. So these are just some observations on society. Then when we go a bit deeper towards org design, we see two issues. The first one, and you can see this is an article by Nikolai, and we'll share the link. But this is that org designers never have enough information, and they can do a lot of interviewing, they can do a lot of reading about the organization, but still there's not enough information to come to the right solution. And once you got the information, then it's very hard to make sense out of it. So we see often that you collect information, and this is a graph. By the way, I'm a mathematician, so I like graphs. But what we do is we blend these kind of visualizations with the insights of consultants like Protina and Shine, who can then come to better organizations. So we solve two problems: the actual capturing of the data and making sense of the data. So our solution is an artificially intelligence powered solution for redesigning organization. And as Nikolai already said, we help to align the organization structure with the actual work processes. So then you need to understand who's working with whom on what, and how would you translate that into a structure. That reduces the internal complexity, and the main parameter that we focused on is the coordination overload. So if you reduce the complexity, you reduce the overload in coordination, and then you free up time to be more productive. And by the way, people are more happy also if they can just do their job and not spend like 40 hours a week just talking to each other, who's going to do what, etc. So better organizations are more productive, and they produce also happier people. So we create flexible and focused units to increase the productivity, reduce the cost, and increase employee satisfaction. You can have a look at our website, www.reconfig.no, and there's also a challenge. So I'll come back to that later, where you can play with the software and see if you can be as good as the computer. Now, we're using data and analytics to create better organizations, and therefore we support leaders and consultants to act on evidence. What we get back from management consultants, this is a paradigm shift. And this is why we like doing these kind of webinars, because we need more people that understand this. It's a little bit strange that in organizational design, we are still not using data, whereas if you want to fight a disease, of course you take a data-driven approach. If you have a self-driving car, of course you use data. But this is quite new in the field, and we are working now on a worldwide basis. But every time when we, in some place of the world, we have this conversation, the management consultants say, this is actually creating a paradigm shift in the way we're working. So we're very happy with the work of PeopleWiz as a pioneer in this field, but we will see a tipping point very soon where it's going to be the normal way of working to use data for org design. And we're very hopeful that it will be embraced by management, because if you look at some evidence from, for example, IBM, who are referencing Gartner, you can see that companies that excel at integrating data into the strategy, operations, culture, design, they're outpacing their peers. So there is now evidence from the actual research that shows that data is paying off. So who do we work for? Well, typically leaders like Dr. Premnath, who want to increase the productivity, who want to reduce internal politics, make better decisions. But we normally work with either internal consultants or external consultants, because we are a tool. So I always say the client needs a house, Protina is the carpenter, and we are the hammer. So don't give the hammer to the person that wants a house, because it will not happen. Just give the hammer to a professional carpenter. So we either work with internal consultants, and for them it's really important to get a seat at the table, because typically the CFO has a lot of data, but now we also give the CHRO data on productivity, and then you have more attention from the rest of the board. The external consultants, we see that they can provide better service, innovate their portfolio, acquire new clients. I have a colleague who's really good in Google Search Ads, and then you do some Google Search Ads on AI and data-driven org design. You get a lot of people that are interested. So those that are consultants in the room, you can just try this for yourself, and you can build a business on this. specifically for independent consultants or boutiques. They can now handle complex reorganization projects and only with a small team. So you don't need an army of consultants that are doing all those interviews. You can compete, therefore, with larger consulting firms. Ultimately, everybody will do this, but currently we see a lot of uptake on the specialists that are more like boutique style. We also help a lot of MBA, universities, etc., to embrace this new way of working. So we do a lot of education there. So where do we typically play and who do we help in terms of maturity? Well, we see in the world that there are still some autocratic leaders, and luckily Dr. Premnat is not one of them, but it still happens that a person goes on holiday and then comes back after 2 weeks and says, this is how we're going to do it. And then people like Protima, they just have to implement it, but it's not a nice way of working because there is obviously a problem with the design and there's a problem with the commitment of the rest of the organization. Now, we also see people that leaders that have a lot of involvement from the rest of the organization, and they just ask everybody their opinion, but they have no structured way of capturing all the information. So spending a lot of time, but still no structured process. And then we see those, and these are the professionals that document the current organization, they generate alternatives, and then they have a way of deciding on the best alternative. Those are the ones that we like working with, and we help them to add data to the whole process. So you got a much stronger process if you have the analytics component, the data. So we use analytical tools to make the right decisions. That's where we play. Again, there is another link that will be shared later on how this works with the maturity model. I just wanted to quickly show you how it actually works. And this is a very simple example. This is a 6-person organization. A is working with E, B is working with C, C is working with D, etc. So you have these patterns of collaboration. And then the question is, with a span of control of 3, who should you place in the same team? Now, Nikolai has already mentioned the criteria that those that are working together should be placed in the same team. But we're adding to it that you should not create a silo, of course, and you should still have a linking pin. Now, if I would allow you to take 6 minutes, you would be able to come up with the answer, but we don't have 6 minutes, so I'm just going to give it myself. So this is the answer. F, E, and A are in one team. C, B, and D are in the other team. And you see that E and C are forming a link. Now, how do we do this? The computer can do this in like 2 seconds. Human beings can do it in 6 minutes. How can the computer be so fast in doing it? You can already see a little bit how the system works. It's based on a matrix. So you put the roles on the horizontal axis and on the vertical axis, and there we have a colored field, you have an interaction. And now with this graphical representation, the computer can calculate the best organization. And that's great. The computer can do it for a simple case, but if you want to do it, so a simple case is like here, you see that there is one team, and you got like a red team and a blue team, you got this linking pin. So this is very simple to be done by a computer and even human beings. But if you have a larger organization, it gets a bit overwhelming if you want to do this with sticky notes or with PowerPoints or with brown paper sessions. So then you really need to have the help of the computer, and that's where we come in. We actually are providing steroids on the analytics process. And as Dr. Premnat is probably gonna expand a little bit upon, it's interesting to see your organization through this lens. So you see that all the deeper colors, they mean a very intense collaboration, and the lighter colors are less intense. But you can also see that if a person on the horizontal axis is reporting that it's very important to work with the person on the vertical axis, but the other person does not report that, we have an ambiguity. So for example, if I say Protima is extremely important to do my work, and Protima says, I don't know, Tim, That's an interesting thing if we are working for the same organization. So then Dr. Prema is looking at his organization saying, well, how is that possible that these people are not working together? And why are those people spending so much time together? So there's a lot of interventions you can do, a lot of insights that you get from your organization already here. Now, we have something that's called the optimization module. So currently we have 100% coordination load here. And then you say, let reconfig optimize, and then you see that it came up with a different organization. So this is the proposed regrouping. Now you don't take the proposed regrouping from the artificial intelligence as a given and you immediately implement. You still need good consultants that have like a philosophy around strategy, culture, legal, etc. The system just takes the mathematical formula, generates an optimized structure, and you can have various alternatives, but this is just an example. You see here, it's a very loosely coupled system, and the system found that these are IT people. There were two kinds of IT people actually, those that were doing infrastructural things, so they should stay in the core of IT, but there are also people that are supporting the business, and they were divided over the other units. So how do we do it? We gather data by means of a questionnaire. So we ask people, who are you working with, on what activities, and what amount of time are you spending on that? Then we visualize the interdependencies. So you can either use the graph or you can use the metrics. And then we optimize, but we also allow the leader or the consultant to redesign based on the suggested organization. And that's looking a little bit different. It's looking like this, where you have different interfaces you can see. So you have your business support department, finance department, license management, etc. So if you want to move Beth from business support to finance, you can do that. You just click and you move her here, and you'll see that the meter will go up and down based on your movement. So we've also gamified this, and then it's on www.reconfig.no/challenge. Word of warning: don't do this when you're very busy, when you have a very busy work week ahead, because you will be staying late at night at the screen trying to beat the computer. But it is fun to get a little bit of a feel for how the human being is doing this versus the computer. Ultimately, we believe in the combination of great people and very strong analytics support. So this was in a nutshell the introduction that I wanted to give.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tim. This is so great. You know, very nicely you summarized the strengths of Reconfig in terms of being able to visualize, provide insights, and also give you almost like a gaming experience where you can move people around and still come up with, you know, answers for your structure. But as they say, proof is in the pudding. So question to Dr. Premnath, you've tried this. You know, in your experience, what was the most valuable feature? Where is it that Reconfig was able to give you insights which have helped?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So first thing is, I'm an engineer, right? And when I see data, design, optimization for anything, I'm a sucker for it. So, so it was exciting to see it. You know, we've been trying to do some of these things with Post-it slips. And it was useful to see the tool first of all, and you know, just the fact that we could get it down somewhere in a format that one could relate to was actually very interesting in the first place itself. In fact, that's what got me sort of going in the first place. I thought this looks cool, let's try it out. Right. Now, when we got into it, I think the first thing I should point out is it is surprising to see some of the ambiguity numbers that Tim mentioned as well. You think that, you know, people who you think would understand, you know, the relationships are well set, and you assume those things as a manager, but sometimes, you know, those are not really clear to people. And that, I think, comes out first when you look at the tables and the data that pops out. Of course, some inclination of this you have, of certain other things like coordination difficulties you have from the frustration that some managers might feel trying to keep the boat together and from sinking, right? People are running around trying to get the thing done. And that, of course, again, it's nice to see a number out there. So in fact, you know, when we put the whole thing together, the coordination load number was actually very interesting. In fact, having metrics to look at is actually, I think, I've not seen that before. So that is quite something which I found very interesting. The other related thing was in the boxes, when we could change the, you know, put somebody in another box and see how the coordination number changes was also, I think, quite valuable, because see, very often when we are busy in our work, we forget to think too much about, I mean, or rather we don't spend as much time sort of trying to design the organization for efficiency, right? And this is a great opportunity to try that out. So in our case, we were able to do it live with Protima and Shine over there. And, you know, our team and PeopleWiz trying to move the boxes around and seeing where exactly, you know, what looks better and what seems, which might work better and so on. So I think that was very helpful. The ambiguity, as I told you as well. Also, I thought it, you know, gave me some insights on optimizing team sizes. That I think was also very useful. It's important to have cohesiveness and complementarity in the teams. And if sometimes you tend the organizational team has the organizational structure has an element of legacy issues, right? In the sense there are legacy issues which shape how an organization might have evolved over a period of time. And people tend to overlook that sometimes, but it comes out when it pops out from your from the analysis. You get a chance to relook those, go back and relook and see whether things have changed and should we be moving away from what we have taken for granted for so many years, or, you know, in terms of organizational structure as well. So I thought that part also was quite useful in terms of reconfig as well. So these are the few things that we immediately struck my mind. But of course, as you know, even that organizational structure, the similar to what Tim showed just now, I have it posted in my office just to keep looking at it, keep staring at it, and that helps as well. Yeah. Can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry, yes, yeah, thank you for that. Yes, and I do remember how valuable, I think all of us, when we were looking at the data in terms of the relationships, the ambiguity, just being able to move around people, all that made so much sense. But there is a question that I guess get most often, and I think some of the questions have also started coming on the chat box. This question that I get is, how do you collect data? And I think someone has even asked, do you do it dynamically or is it batch collected? So I think if that's something that we can answer for the audience, that'll be great. Nikolai, Tim, you would like to take that?
Sure. Yeah, so currently we are using a survey questionnaire that is distributed to the respondents via email to collect data. And the reason for this is that we wanted this tool to be as light as possible. We didn't want, you know, a long systems integration effort in order to capture data from the internal IT systems in firms. But so, and it's a very, you know, easy way to quickly collect data. Having said that, we are also considering new data sources. I might, if I have time, go into that later. So we are considering to also collect data from email servers and Zoom traffic and so on. But we have been a little bit hesitant because we know that the data we will get from these sources will be a big spaghetti, like the graph that Tim showed earlier. And the key element of Reconfig is that people are asked to qualify each connection they have. So they're not only asked, who do you talk to, but also what do you talk about? What process are you collaborating in? How frequently do you meet, and so on. So this extra information makes it possible to qualify this information and to judge it and think about and analyze the importance of the different relationships. So that we won't have if we collect standard email traffic data, for example. But nonetheless, it's something we're going to explore the next few months to see maybe they can be merged in some way. Okay.
And I think a related question there is, how often is a suggested review required to the existing structure?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, I mean, most of our clients or partners, they use this as part of a redesign process. So when the stakeholders in the system have decided that there is time for a review of the organization, that's when you do it. Mm-hmm. And this, I've talked about this in other forums, that this is a fairly subjective decision. You have to feel on your body, so to speak, that you've been having an organization for some time, but the frustration is rising because it's not working as well as possible, and you have to put this on the agenda of the organization first, and then for some firms this might be every year. For other firms, maybe in more stable industries, it could be once every 10 years. So nonetheless, we would also suggest that one considers using it in a different way. So, for example, to evaluate the outcomes of a redesign. That would be very interesting, if one can correlate the information that one collected before a redesign with how people work after the redesign. I think this would make it into a much more rigorous discipline, where you, like in medicine, you try out the effect of an intervention before and after. So it would make it into more of an experiment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if I could just add to that, in the last 10 years, if I just look back and see what kind of questions and problems and situations clients have put across to us, which is needed in organizational redesign, it has usually been around change in the strategy, change in the business model, expanding to a new geography, merging of certain units, decentralizing certain ways of working. So if there's a major change which is going on in the organization, I think that has always triggered a review of the structure and the reporting relationships, etc., inside the organization. But Nikolai, would you like to tell us more? What more things we can expect from Reconfig in the coming months?
Sure. So let me see if I go to the right slide here. Oh, I missed it. There we go. Yeah, so we are constantly improving the system, but we're going to keep the basic philosophy that we currently have. So if you can see this map here, this is showing the various initiatives that we're working on to further extend the functionality. So as I mentioned, we are working on this possibility of collecting also data from email traffic and Zoom Teams, maybe, and so we actually have received a little bit of support from the government in Norway as well to help fund that research project. So first we'll need to find out how to do it, and then we'll see if we can correlate that data with the data that we currently collect from the survey questionnaire. And then there are always minor changes that we are making based on the feedback that we get from the users. So people are telling us, can we filter in this way or that way, or can we change the buttons and colors? And we're trying to make these incremental changes continuously. As for more extensive changes, we are also considering how we can extend Reconfig and maybe move into some neighboring domains. There are some of our partners who are interested in governance issues. So we are considering how to use Reconfig to not only map work processes and interdependencies, but also the different types of reporting relationships. And that may make it possible to map matrix organizations in completely new ways if we succeed at that. We're also going to introduce even better metrics than we have today, but based on the ones that we have today, but we are considering now how to calculate the actual productivity gain of the solution that the system generates. And also several other incremental changes that are mentioned on this slide, but I don't think I have time to go into that. But this is something that we discuss periodically with the partners that we have, and so we have a plan, a product roadmap for the next couple of years actually that we're following.
Great. So, and yeah, as partners, I think we're looking forward to some of these features being added to the product in the coming months. There's one more question, that I get very often, and Tim, maybe I'll put that to you. The biggest concern on this approach seems to be that org structure is not just about productivity and efficiency. It is about strategy. It is about business plans. It is about taking certain decisions which might not be, might not show gain in the immediate term, but in long term, having a long-term view. So does Reconfig help? Does Reconfig have a role to play? Yes or no?
Well, there is a limitation in the system, which means that you cannot just use the tool and give it in the hands of a senior leader because it cannot see everything. So we position Reconfig as a tool, and as I was saying before, it's like a hammer, but you also need other tools to build the organization. So we do link, of course, our approach to the strategic goals, but when it comes to the calculation machine, it does not know about legal environment. It does not know about certain cultural aspects. So this is why it's really important. And I gave you the visualization of the design module. So after you capture the data, after you visualize the data, after you optimize your structure, there is still a big role for the consultant to see. For example, if Pete and John are mentoring each other, they should be in the same unit, but it's not reported currently. So you have a lot of creativity, you have a lot of compliance issues, you've got a lot of other things, but it's still a great tool in the hand of a consultant to see this explicit monitoring. You can give it a lot of feedback to your client, like Dr. Premnath in this case, and you can even ask Dr. Premnath to play with it. But don't take the tool just as the only source of truth. It's helping to professionalize the way consultants are working, but it is only a tool. And that's why we're always happy to work with people like yourself.
I could perhaps just add to that,
yes.
So Reconfig is based on a bottom-up approach, where the main assumption is that you need to understand how people work and collaborate, and then try to fit the formal structure to that. But having said that, it's also possible to some extent to use it from the top-down perspective. Even though it's not primarily built for that, it can support certain what-if analysis. So, for example, you can also group roles by category. So if you have information about people in the organization and whether they work in certain geographies or whether they work on certain products, you can actually group the roles, and you can do analysis where you also compare a product-based or geographical model with the Reconfig algorithmic solution. So it can also partly support a top-down analysis in the design process. But I would also always recommend, as Tim said, to collect other data. I mean, you can run the organization design process in a more efficient way with Reconfig, but it does not mean that you shouldn't talk to people internally or collect other types of information that will complement what you have in the tool.
Yeah, and I think that's one big help as an external consultant for me, that the tool is able to collect the data quickly, show me insights. I would have spent hours interviewing people and making sense of the relationships and interpreting this information, and it does it very quickly. But there's one other aspect that I find extremely useful as an external person is that before Reconfig, I had no tool to use to compare options, right? So when I come up with different options on a structure and I take them back to a client, it is mostly on pros and cons and our experience and our own understanding that we put that. And how many options can I come up with? 2, 3, 4. But Reconfig allows me to come with tremendous number of options, and not just that, it gives me at least one really great objective method to be able to compare the different options and say that, okay, what would be more beneficial to the organization. That has been such a great feature within Reconfig that has really helped us in making sense of some of the proposals and the options that we're looking at. Great, thank you so much for that. Nicola, I know you've already answered one very nice question that Amit asked, but everybody can't see the answer. So would you mind if I just put that question across to you? Yeah. So what Amit has said is, while we're working on organization design, how do you balance between speed and quality of delivery? And how do you align it with the overall direction of business?
Yeah. So we could have a whole webinar just on these two questions. So this is going to be a very tabloid answer from me. But in terms of the alignment with the overall direction, so there are some principles and tools in organization design that one can use here. But basically, it's about trying to understand what the strategy is of the organization, what the priorities are, and really write that down. And then what we recommend is that you create an explicit set of design criteria. So, for example, a design criterion can be that our future organization should help us become more customer focused, or our future organization should help us become more efficient, or whatever it is. And this has to be then aligned with the strategies, so that the choice is a way of realizing and implementing a strategy. So you need an explicit process for that, and you need to document these different links between the strategy and the organization. And about the quality versus speed, well, if I interpret this correctly, that I assume that when one thinks that there might be a conflict between the two. So in my opinion, if it's a major reorganization, one should implement the required amount of time in that process. So so it's necessary to get the sufficient quality and the world can wait. So there's often a false sense of urgency in these processes, and that is because people are uncomfortable. So when somebody's saying that we're going to review the organization, it immediately creates uncertainty among employees, and that creates this sense of urgency and what I would call a false sense of urgency, because it doesn't matter if it takes 6 months. If you make the right decision after 6 months, that can actually make the implementation process much faster. So if you're forced to take a very quick decision because of the uncertainty, you may make a worse choice, and you will have to spend 3 years to implement a complex model. So my general assertion has been that it pays off to invest time in this process, and that will actually make it go faster when you implement the model.
But if we take the question to the actual business priority, and maybe Dr. Premnath, you can also give me your view. As a leader of the business, are these decisions hard to make, easy to make? You're trying to compare speed versus quality. As you said, you want to have a nimble organization, but isn't quality equally important? And how do you really compare and come up with solutions around that?
Yeah. So when Nikolai spoke about speed and delivery, probably he was talking about the organizational change process. But there's also this aspect of the organization itself, right? Delivering its products and services and whatever that it needs to do. So clearly, see, the tool, of course, has to work on the assumption that you're working in a rational world, right? You cannot accommodate for irrationality, and that's fortunate for the managers here, because that gives us the reason to exist, right? But basically, I think largely, thankfully, the world is quite rational. So I think that's good, and that's what makes it useful as a whole. Now, as far as speed and quality of delivery specifically is concerned, it is extremely important for all of us. And I think very often a lot of things slip because of poor coordination, right? So I mean, it's useful that, in my opinion, that the focus is on coordination. Smaller teams which are fairly autonomous in terms of being able to deliver. Of course, that requires a different level of design also, where you make sure that it's autonomous, right? Operationally autonomous. But that, I think, ensures ensures that people can operate with fair amount of speed. Okay. And quality is a sort of an overlay of how you will ensure that you're minimizing errors, you're following SOPs, and so on and so forth. It connects to this process, I think, through the workflows, and that's, well, I'm not a expert in the field, but just by intuition, I think it still helps me think through where my workflows are not aligned in one direction, and where people are not aligned with along the workflow as well. So I found that useful, even just the thinking process around it. The exercise of doing it is helpful. Right. And sitting down and spending some time thinking through it, trying out different combinations and seeing what works, I think is very valuable. So even for speed and quality of delivery.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Nikolai, I think you've answered Gail's question, but do you want to just tell us a little bit more? So Gail has asked, can you do the mapping when people may be part of different processes? Is that okay? And can you do that in Reconfig?
Yeah, so the questionnaire is rather simple. So but first you are shown a list of employees in the unit or organization that's being covered by the survey. And then you're asked to pick the ones that you interact with in some way. And then on the next screen, once you have picked one or more people, you're asked then in which work process do you collaborate? So in other words, one person will be attached to potentially several work processes.
Okay, so yeah, it's going to be possible.
So and you can then filter the data based on that afterwards. So for example, if you want to see who coordinates in the marketing process only, you can filter out all the other processes. So you focus only on a sub process or a process.
Okay. Yes, great. We don't have any more questions. Unless somebody has any questions, I'm more than happy to put it across to the panel. But yes, this has been so good, trying to understand the different parts of Reconfig, and then hearing from Dr. Premnath also about how Reconfig is generating insights for you. I think I'll stop here. I'm not seeing a lot of questions. There are a couple of ones that we've already answered. Nikolai has been extremely productive typing away the answers. It's really useful, really useful there. So I think just last thank you from our side. If any of you would like to know more, if you would like to know about the organizational design offering, if you would like a detailed demo of Reconfig, do just send us a line on od.ai@peoplewiz-consulting.com, and we would be very happy to respond and take you through it. Any last thoughts from the panel? Anything that you have to add or say? I'll take that. Tim, anything from your side?
Just wanted to thank you for this interesting webinar, and also for the cooperation so far. I think we are seeing a paradigm shift, and it's an interesting time to contribute to it.
Anything from you, Nikolai? Anything to add?
I would like to say the same thing, that I've appreciated participating here. And if there are questions, contact Protima, Tim, or myself, and we'll try to respond.
Dr. Premnath, thank you so much. Anything more from your side? Any advice, any guidance, how we should go further would be very, very welcome. You're muted.
No, my best wishes to the team. I
Thank
will,
you.
of course, come up with my long list of wish lists,
Yes.
which should be about 5 to 10 years of research for Nikolai. But that said, I think I really like to see numbers, graphs, and this is the era of data and data analysis. So I think we are in the right direction. This is not a field which we should not be using any of the data tools. I mean, this is something which is very important, clearly one of the core functions of an organization. So I think it is important we are doing this. Thank you very much, Nikolai.
Thank you.
And team.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please feel free to send any questions and we will try and respond to them as and when we can. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a good Makar Sankranti, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Nikolai.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.